Welcome to Everything Casual, bringing you original football casual videos from the golden era of the 80s and 90s, right up to current day. Football away day stories and historic clashes between football firms. Subscribe so you don't miss out. We upload videos every week. Stoke Naughty 40. In this video, we look at the notorious and highly rated football firm, the Naughty 40. We will hear true accounts from actual members of the firm on how and why the Naughty 40 started, and then listen to real stories of their biggest and most violent clashes. If you want to add to any of the stories in this video, or even if you disagree with some of the statements and have a different account, then please let us know in the comment section. But for now, let's dive right in with an introduction of the Naughty 40. Then after that, we will get right to the juicy bits about actual clashes. At their height, the firm had over 700 members and were among the more violent football hooligan firms in England. In January 1998, dozens of hooligans invaded the pitch at the club's new Britannia Stadium at the end of a 7-0 Division 1 defeat by Birmingham City, and several seats were thrown onto the pitch. This was one of several traumatic events in one of the worst seasons in the club's history, as they were relegated from Division 1 at the end of it. On 21st October 2001, 84 people were arrested after rival fans clashed at Stoke City's local Potteries derby with Port Vale. Violence broke out in the streets around Vale Park in the Burslem district of Stoke. There were 2 pitch invasions, and fans from both clubs threw missiles at each other. About 300 police officers were drafted in to keep the peace. On 29th of December, hooligans from the Naughty 40 and another firm associated with the club, the Under Fives, fought with hooligans from Huddersfield Town in Huddersfield. In the worst incident, Stoke fans smashed up and set fire to the White Hart pub, causing extensive damage. On 28th April 2002, Stoke City played Cardiff City at home. Staffordshire Police mounted a large operation and had to call in officers from other forces, and around 1,000 officers were on duty on the day. The match had to be halted for 7 minutes as the police attempted to arrest Stoke hooligans in the ground. After the game, police were pelted with stones, and Cardiff City chairman Sam Hammam had his car vandalised. On the 1st of May, violence again erupted between hooligans of the 2 clubs when they met in a Division 2 playoff match. 5 people were arrested as trouble erupted after Cardiff lost the match when hooligans from both clubs confronted each other outside Ninian Park. 3 police officers needed hospital treatment following disturbances, while a number of others suffered minor injuries. Officers using batons struggled to keep the 2 sets of fans apart as missiles, including stones, bottles and fence posts, were thrown from the Cardiff side. Former Naughty 40 founding members Mark Chester and Paul Griffiths wrote a book about their exploits with the firm in 2006, stating that he was a reformed character and that they were proud of their past, having moved on from the violence of football hooliganism. The N40 code was simple. Whatever the odds, they would always make a stand. Many times they fought when heavily outnumbered, yet often came out on top. They developed a closeness and cohesion rare among football firms. Loyalty was their matchword. Soon they would be joined by the Under Fives, a younger element determined to gain acceptance from the terrace legends they admired, and who carved out their own niche, as well as fighting side by side with the old school heads. Police operations, bans from the ground, and the introduction of ID schemes have prevented many from attending games. But the author, long retired from the scene, argues that in the new millennium the gangs are back, and as ferocious as ever. Now let's get into the juicy bits, how Mark Chester got involved with the Naughty 40, and real accounts of what was actually like being involved with the firm. Everything you're about to hear now is taken from the book Naughty, the story of a football hooligan gang. It's a great book, and I will leave a link in the description if you are interested in buying it. Here goes. The Glebe is an old 3-storey corner pub in Stoke town centre, next to the King's Hall and its car park, and directly opposite the graveyard. It was well placed to build the foundations of what was going to be Stoke's first organised firm. Wilson was lively and started to provide transport, tipping people off by word of mouth. In no time, he had amassed 50 lads from all corners of the city for his first trip, to Sheffield United for a cup tie. A few weeks later, he had 4 coaches at Everton. Every game lad in the city began talking about the Glebe coaches. They were bringing warring factions together for the first time, though not without the inevitable disagreements that different tribes encounter when sat at council. I could not believe my eyes. The place was full of evil-looking lads. Some were big, some were small, but they all had that time look served in their eyes. It was obvious that every one of these men, with ages ranging from 17 to 25, were going to Birmingham at 10 o'clock in the morning for a fight. I liked what I was seeing. There was over 100 game-looking lads, organised and concealed from unwanted attention, travelling in at an early time to ensure they reached their destination without complications, and, from what I was hearing, intending to have a go at the Holt end. Even better, a strategy as well. I decided to watch and listen for a while, to see who was who. I knew a couple of the older faces. They had been about when I was a kid, but I didn't know anybody by name. There were a lot of acknowledging nods and winks, but there seemed to be a lot of laughter, only amongst the groups that actually came from Stoke and the surrounding Trent Vale, Fenton and Longton areas. Other groups of 3s and 4s were from places like Stone and Cheadle, all semi-rural, and they were similar to us Alsager lads. It seemed we would have to wait to be accepted on performances rather than just looking the part. One man who did look the part was a big, gruff bullneck of a character from Trent Vale. He was called Miffer, and just the sight of his big tattooed forearms and the sound of the deepest voice I have ever heard had me staring at him quite openly, not in an offensive way, but slightly in awe. A certain kindness in his manner was blatantly apparent, but he was not a man to F around with. My first impression of Miffer was correct. I was looking at one of the top boys of this era. The man was full on character and loved life, especially Stoke City and his mates. At 19 years old, Miffer was in charge of the Glebe mob, and led by example, I was about to see him in action on the first day of meeting him. We arrived in Aston at 11:30. Both coaches pulled up outside the Aston Villa Sports Centre, and 100 lads spilled out into the streets, immediately adopting this new walk with swinging of arms and flicking of heads. They had adopted their own form of identification, and you could tell by the way each individual presented himself how much confidence and status he held amongst this pack. Other members who took prominence were Ant and Midge Walton, 2 brothers in their early 20s, who came with a small number of Smallthorne lads from over the east side of the city. Gaz Gwilt was probably the oldest at 25, a tall, well-built lad with poor eyesight and horrible milk bottle glasses that had been repaired a dozen times. His was a face I remembered the Boothen in the 70s. Over the years I could never quite work out whether Gwilty was either one of the gamest lads I had ever met, or was that blind he couldn't see who were fighting until he caught one in the kisser. Either way, Gwilty stood, and in time was one of the first Stoke lads to get to know me. Along with Gaz and Dalton, I had seen this man in action plenty of times as a kid. I was made up. I had finally managed to get close to those lads that I had so wanted to be like as a boy. Jem was right. This was mental. You could feel the energy building as confidence jostled with arrogance, the fear of violence from within this pack at any second, only heightening the adrenaline that was pumping around my body. What a buzz. And there hadn't been a punch thrown yet. Our bus driver Terry was the man that Russ Abbott modelled himself on. Terry and his Mrs. Jean were both Teds and were well into their 40s. Jean had a bleached blonde beehive, and Terry wore drain pipes and winkle pickers, with his tight curly black hair, ever so slightly quiffed. 100 lads landed at Villa and turned in unison and looked in the direction of a public house across the road. It was 10 to 12, a good time to launch a swift attack and show them how much we wanted the row and hopefully gain the psychological advantage. No effing noise, no effing noise. That was a brief snippet from Mark Chester's book. In a future video we will focus on the naughty 40s, most famous violent clashes and rivalries. I just want to leave you on this article explaining the naughty 40s. The Naughty 40 was a notorious football firm associated with Stoke City Football Club, emerging prominently during the late 70s and continuing their activities through the 80s and 90s. Known for their violent confrontations and hooliganism, the Naughty 40 became infamous within the English football casual scene. Comprised mainly of young working-class men, they engaged in organised fights with rival firms, both at home and away matches. Their name derives from the group's initial membership count of around 40 individuals. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you subscribe, you will be notified when we release a new video. It could be your firm we make a video about next, so don't miss out and hit the subscribe button. You can find me on Facebook or email me if you have a good story to tell. See you next time.